The theme of Isaiah is the transformation of Zion. How we get from a corrupt and idolatrous Jerusalem in the old creation to a holy and completely devoted to Yahweh and righteous Zion in the new creation. So today I'm not giving lectures on holy, but I have a very different idea of the meaning of the word holy, and you can look that up. Most people think that holy means set apart. This is an etymology that was from Baudissin in 1887, and it's wrong. And as you all know, we don't determine the meaning of a word by etymology. So the best analysis is by a French evangelical scholar, Claude Bernard Costecalde, Aux origines du sacré biblique, and that one is not translated. But I have published articles on this. So to be holy means to be consecrated to, devoted to, committed to, loyal to. If it meant set apart, it would occur with the preposition from, and it never occurs with the preposition from. It always occurs with the preposition to. So, this is Isaiah's theme. Jerusalem is idolatrous and corrupt. How can we get from there to the people of God who are now completely devoted, completely loyal, loving God, loving their neighbor as themselves in the new creation? And he goes around the topic 7 times. So this is how Hebrew literature, let's see, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself here. Hebrew literature is, let me talk about this. Hebrew literature is based on repetition. So as soon as a Hebrew opens his mouth, he's going to repeat himself. Okay? This is why the Old Testament is so boring to people in the Western world, because they do not understand how this literature communicates. So you start a topic, and you go around the conversation, and you shut that conversation down. Start another topic over here. At first it looks like you're talking about something different, and then you realize he's talking about the same thing from a different angle, a different perspective, a different point of view. And these are like the left and right speakers of a stereo system. So now you're getting the message in Dolby surround sound, you see. That's why you have Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. That's why you have Exodus 14 and Exodus 15. That's why you have Judges 4 and Judges 5, you see. That's why you have, Psalms is in poetry is in couplets. Left speaker, right speaker, left speaker, right speaker. And Isaiah goes around 7 times, so Dolby 7.2. Isaiah's description of the new Zion as a city, and he's talking both about a geographical location and a people, brings a challenge to covenant theology because the community is not mixed. We will see that. It is also a challenge to dispensational theology because the community is not defined in ethnic national terms. Introduction. So in an essay on the literary macrostructures of the book of Isaiah, published in the Wheaton Symposium on Isaiah, entitled Bind Up the Testimony, I laid out 4 features key to interpreting the book of Isaiah. And if you want to do this, if you Google Peter J. Gentry, academia.edu, you will find my academia page, and all of these articles you can download for free, okay? Don't always put my middle initial in, okay? Because if you do Peter Gentry, there's some guy called Peter Gentry who writes erotic literature, so. You will end up in the wrong camp. I don't write grotty novels, okay? 4 features key to interpreting Isaiah. I don't think these are here. I have some slides, but not enough. Number one, the role of text linguistics or discourse grammar. It's called discourse analysis in North America, but Europeans call it text linguistics. So I'm on board with the Europeans here. Number two, the nature of Hebrew discourse or literature. Number three, the character of the author. And four, the nature of Hebrew prophecy. Here I shall appeal again to these features, and especially to the author's tendency to introduce an idea or topic in a mysterious manner, and then to delay further information that enables readers to fully understand the topic until a later point in the discourse. So that's typical of Isaiah. He starts talking about something and you have no idea what he's talking about till he gets to the end. So here is an outline of Isaiah 38 to 55. 38 and 39 is the prose introduction. I eliminated that because I couldn't fit it all on one slide. So that was the only reason. The literary structure of Isaiah 38 to 55 shows that the return from exile involves two distinct issues and stages. This section looks farther into the future, beyond the judgment of exile, to the comfort and consolation of Israel, that is, bringing them back from exile. Then the Lord will establish Zion as the people or place, both the people and the place, where all nations will seek his instruction for covenant justice. So you see that in chapter 2. The mountain, Jerusalem becomes a mountain that's higher than all the other mountains, and all the nations of the world are going there to seek Torah. The Hebrew word Torah does not mean law, it means instruction. It's the instruction in the covenant. This is described in the language of the Exodus, implying that the return from the Babylonian exile will be nothing less than a new and greater Exodus. This new Exodus is also described by the term redeem, Ga'al. The word Ga'al in Hebrew refers to the duties of the nearest relative. So if you want to know the duties of the nearest relative, you read Leviticus 25. The nearest relative has three duties: to buy back, if you fall into debt, he pays your debts. And if you mortgage your property, he gets your property out of debt. If you mortgage yourself, you could sell yourself for a slave. Then he redeems you as a person. And then there's the redemption of blood. So there are three duties to the nearest relative. Now listen to this. Since by virtue of the Israelite covenant, Yahweh is Israel's nearest relative, he will buy back his people from exile as he once delivered them from bondage and slavery in Egypt. So this is why the verb Ga'al is used of the Exodus, because when Yahweh and Israel, in the Mosaic covenant, Exodus 20 to 24, Yahweh and Israel get married. And when you get married, someone who is not your blood relative is now closer than any blood relative. So Yahweh is the nearest relative, and that's why he redeems them from Egypt. But we're going to see in the book of Isaiah how this is not only applied to the first Exodus, it's also applied to the second Exodus, the new Exodus. The return from exile is not a momentary task. The promises of redemption are divided into two distinct events. Release in chapter 42 to 43:21, or let's see, 40, and release in 42:14 to 43:21, and forgiveness in 43:22, 44:23. So there are two problems. Number one, you have to get the people out of Babylon. But number two, how do you get Babylon out of the people? So The number one is release, and number two is forgiveness. Forgiveness of sins. Release refers to bringing the people physically out of exile and back to their own land. Forgiveness entails dealing fully and finally with their sin and the broken covenant. And you can see, I'm not taking time to really deal with this, there are two agents of redemption. And the two agents of redemption correspond to the two stages of return from exile. So Cyrus is the one who brings them back from Babylon, and the servant is the one who brings them back from sin. And then he starts, notice at the beginning you have the consolation of Israel and the consolation of the Gentiles. And at the end, once the redemption has been accomplished, you have the call to Zion and then the call to the world. This is why Paul preached the gospel to the Jew first and then to the Gentile, because it comes from Isaiah. This is the redemption of Israel in Isaiah 42:18 to 44:23. So this lecture is quite different. We're doing big picture stuff, getting out of the weeds. The paragraph 43, so and a lot of this comes from Alec Motier's commentary, which is very good on the literary structure. So the physical redemption, Israel's covenant disloyalty resulted in exile. That parallels the depth of sin. Creating the new Israel involves bringing the exiles home. Creating the new Israel, the nations are included. Then thirdly, the Lord, Savior, and only God is contrasted with idols. The Lord, Redeemer, and only God is contrasted with idols. And then the redemption from Babylon, and then the redemption from sin. So these two sections have parallel parts to them. The paragraph in 43:1-7 is a mighty assurance and promise that Yahweh himself will deliver and rescue his people. And I think we should read that text. I haven't really read scripture. Here, let's read the text. And this is just the ESV. I hope that's okay. I can read it out of the Hebrew if you want. But now, thus says the Lord. Well, they have it in the past tense. I guess I have to read it in the Hebrew. Your Creator. It says in the Hebrew, your Creator, O Jacob, and the one who forms you, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Seba in exchange for you, because you are precious in my eyes, and honored, and I loved you. I give men in return for you, peoples in exchange for your life. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and from the west I will gather you. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed and made. So it's a mighty assurance and promise of that Yahweh himself will deliver and rescue his people. It is this ability to rescue and save that distinguishes him from all the idols. The next paragraph is clear and explicit about the redemption. God will free his people from Babylon. Notice how this paragraph begins and ends by affirming that Yahweh has created and formed Israel as his people. We shall return to this in a moment. The people are commanded not to fear because Yahweh has redeemed them. The word redeem means to do the duty of the nearest relative. In the Torah, the duty of the nearest relative entails a number of responsibilities. First, one must buy back property a relative has had to mortgage because of poverty. Second, one must buy back a relative who sold him or herself into slavery to pay debts. And thirdly, one must avenge the blood of a relative for murder. I have attempted to show that in Exodus 24, by virtue of the covenant ratified between God and Israel on Mount Sinai, Yahweh is Israel's nearest relative. Verse 2 speaks of the difficulties and trials that the people of God will encounter in the process of redemption. Notice that the text does not say, if you pass through the waters, but rather, when you pass through the waters. The deliverance, rescue, and salvation which will be accomplished by God is not a deliverance from or out of great trials and tribulations, but a bringing of his people safely through these trials. We can debate this later, but I think the whole period between the first and coming of Christ, the second coming of Christ, is the Great Tribulation. We're in it now. Verse 2 speaks of the difficulties in terms of floodwaters. This and a number of other images in this context are from the Exodus. Isaiah is describing a future rescue and redemption using language from God's great deliverance in the past. So that's typology. You use the past as a model or pattern of the future. It is also a reference to Isaiah 8, where the people must choose between the mighty river of Assyria and the gentle waters of Shiloah, or as you would know it, Siloam. Ahaz chose poorly. He chose the mighty river of Assyria, which floods Judah up to the neck. So I don't know, that's one of those Indiana Jones movies, right? Ahaz chose poorly. Verse 2b also speaks of fire. Although the first Exodus involved passing through the waters, the second Exodus will involve being rescued through the fire. Isaiah 1:31 and 6:13 pictures the coming judgment as fire. So you see that. And you actually see it at the end of the book. For the last verse of Isaiah is the closest verse in the entire Old Testament that you get to the New Testament doctrine of hell. I believe that Isaiah develops this from the way God reveals himself at Sinai. Moses saw the burning bush, and then God reveals himself on Sinai as fire, and then every day there's a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire at night. So this is how God revealed himself, and I think this is where he gets this. In verse 3, the name for God is the title given to him in Exodus 20. It is the way he is announced at the beginning of the covenant in the 10 words. Note verse 3b, I have given, and verse 4, I will give. These verses present a problem for the thoughtful Christian. It may seem crass and unjust that God gives other humans as a ransom for his own people. A comparison, though, is being drawn between the original Exodus and the new Exodus. In the original Exodus, God punished the Egyptians and rescued his people Israel. And this could be thought of as giving Egypt as a ransom to release Israel from bondage. Verse 3 is in the past, I have given. Verse 4 is in the future, I will give. In the new Exodus, God will also give other people, even other nations, as a ransom to deliver his people. What is not clearly stated here, but must be remembered, is that Pharaoh hardened his own heart against the Lord and deserved the judgment brought upon him and the false gods worshipped by the Egyptians. In the same way, when God rescues Israel from Babylon, judgments will fall upon the Babylonians. We must not think that this will be unfair or unjust, since these judgments will be well deserved by the Babylonians, as other passages in Isaiah have already made clear and will make clear. Chapter 13 and 14, chapter 21, and chapters 46 and 47. In verses 5 and 6, God calls the exiles home. The beginning of this section has a narrow and national ring to it. Jacob and Israel are specified in verse 1. The ending has a universal ring to it. Everyone who is called by my name. Let us come now to the exegetical problem in this text. Notice how creation language is employed both at the beginning and at the end. So you can see here, and now thus says Yahweh, Borakah, your creator, O Jacob, Yotzercha, the one who forms you, O Israel. So these are creation verbs. verse 7, everyone who is called by my name, and for my glory I have created him, bara, I have formed him, I have made. So those are all verbs from Genesis 1. In verse 1, we have create, bara, and form. In verse 7, we have the same two verbs plus make, asa. How, here's the question, how is Yahweh the creator of Israel? Is Isaiah thinking of the creation account in Genesis 1, or is he thinking of the creation of the nation at Sinai? Note particularly that both verbs are participles in verse 1. In many of our English translations, they are rendered as past tenses. Is this justified? Is it possible instead that Yahweh is the creator of Israel in another sense, that he is creating a future Israel, a new Israel, through the second Exodus? This option is supported by the author's tendency to introduce an idea or topic in a mysterious manner and then to delay further information that enables readers to understand the topic fully until a later point in the discourse. In verse 1, he speaks of Yahweh creating Israel. Then at the end of the section, he explains how he will create Israel, by bringing the exiles home. This is supported by the fact that he concludes by using the same creation language, only this time he employs past tenses. The exiles are described as the sons and daughters of Yahweh who are scattered to all 4 points of the compass. The paragraph 44, 1-5 appears to repeat the thought of 43, 1-7, but with these differences. So we should read that. Quickly read 44. So remember I said that Hebrew authors always repeat themselves. 44, 1-5, he's going around the topic a second time. But now hear, O Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. Thus says the Lord, who made you, who formed you from the womb and will help you. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. I will pour water on the thirsty land, streams on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. They shall spring up among the grass like willows by flowing streams. This one will say, I am the Lord's. Another will call on the name of Jacob. Another will write on his hand the Lord's, and name himself by the name of Israel. This paragraph appears to repeat the thought of 43, 1-7. But with differences. So first we had the left speaker, now we're going to look at the right speaker. First, as in 43, 1-7, we have the identification of Israel. Israel is the servant of Yahweh. She is chosen by the Lord. She is created or made by Yahweh. She is formed by Yahweh, and he will help her. Second, as in 43, 1-7, Israel is given assurance. Thirdly, as in 43, 1-7, there is a reason for the assurance. Yahweh pours water on the desert and pours his spirit on the offspring of Israel. Fourthly, as in 43, 1-7, the result of help and rescue from Yahweh is the growth of Israel and the nations incorporated into Israel. The second statement explains the first. How will the growth of Israel happen? Answer, by incorporating the nations into Israel. This last point must be defended since disparate interpretations have been offered. We see a people who are glad to acknowledge their relationship to God, with God. This is expressed in 4 statements following a pattern of A, B, A prime, B prime. A, this one will say, I belong to the Lord. B, this one will call by the name of Jacob. A prime, this will write on his hand, belonging to the Lord. So there's a tattoo. And B prime, this one will give the name Israel as an honorary title. The A lines express the notion of belonging. The B lines mention folk who seem to adopt the name of Jacob or Israel. Who are these folks? Some scholars believe they are Jews who during the diaspora hid their Jewishness. They did not want to proclaim their identity and relationship with the Lord. When God brings about this time of blessing and restoration to the descendants of the exiles, there will be a glad response. They will now be happy to admit they know God and proclaim their relationship to Him. A major problem for this interpretation is that writing belonging to Yahweh on one's hand as a tattoo would be forbidden by the Torah. So this can't be Jews. All right, Gentiles do tattoos, but not Jews. A better interpretation, and one that fits well with the narrative plot structure and storyline of Isaiah, is that these are Gentiles who adopt Yahweh as their God and Israel as their people. Having a tattoo on one's hand would not be a problem for Gentiles. Once again, note that the forms in verse 2 are participles. Yahweh is the maker of Israel. He is the one who forms and shapes them. The last form is a prefix form. He will help them. Here, the future tense clearly shows that Isaiah is not contemplating the creation of Israel in terms of Genesis 1 or Sinai, but as a future event. He's talking about the creation of Israel as a future event. And this event in the future entails non-Jews who are joined to Yahweh in Israel. In other words, here Yahweh is also bringing the exiles home, only these exiles are non-Jewish exiles. Note how Isaiah 56 verse 8 expresses this. Quote, For the sovereign Lord who brings back the exiles of Israel says, I will gather more in addition to Israel. Did you get that? I will gather more in addition to Israel, in addition to his gathered ones. Not all exiles coming home are ethnic, national Israelites. And this is confirmed in Jeremiah. So if you look at Jeremiah chapter 12, every nation is going to be sent into exile. And if they learn to swear by Yahweh, then those exiles will be brought back home and will be built up in the midst of Judah, of Israel. So you have the same message there. Isaiah 50, now we're going to look at chapter 50, verse 10 to 52, verse 12, and the creation of a new Israel. First note, let's see what we have here. First note that chapter 50, verse 10 to 50, verse 12 belongs to the part of Isaiah 38 to 55 where the work of the agent of redemption from sin is being described. There is a panel of 3 poems about the servant of Yahweh. Now we all know that there are four songs in Isaiah that deal with the servant of Yahweh, but one of them is in chapter 42. It's part of the introduction. So there are 3 together, and these 3 match the 3 panels in Isaiah 5 to 12, the Emmanuel prophecy, the mighty God, and the root from the stump of Jesse. And they're connected. They're connected. Isaiah 53 talks about a shoot coming out of a dry ground. He wants you to he wants you to see in your mind the servant is the shoot from chapter 11. And the guy who translated the Septuagint actually, instead of using the word shoot, he used the word paideon, child, because he wanted you to connect it with chapter 9, for unto us a child is born. So this interpretation that I'm giving is as old as the 2nd century BC. And John sees it in John chapter 12. We don't have time to go into all of these. So there are 3 poems. 3 poems. Sorry, I keep hitting that key and that thing comes up. There are 3 poems. There's the first one, the servant's double mission to Israel and the world. And then we have a comment, the mission to the world, Israel and the world is explained. And then there are messages of comfort to the despondent Zion. And you have the same pattern. In chapter 50, we see the servant listening and obedient in suffering. And then we have a comment, are we trusting the servant or your own way? And then we have messages of comfort to the respondent Zion. And then in chapter 52 to 55, we have the servant successful, sin-bearing, and victor. And the comment is actually included in the song itself. And then we have a message of comfort for Israel and for the world. But the first chapter 49, the servant has a double mission. He has a mission to Israel and the world. So in October of 2003, I was invited to speak at a conference in Leuven, in Belgium, on the Septuagint. And I'd never been to Belgium. But I had friends in Leiden, at the University of Leiden. Okay, so I thought, I'm going to fly into Amsterdam. I'm going to take the train up to Leiden, meet my friends, and I'll let them take me to Belgium, because I don't know how to get there. So you know how wonderful Schiphol is. I came in on the plane and went down into the basement and jumped on my train. And I'm sitting there waiting. I'm sitting there waiting for the train, and just before the door closed, this fat little European Jew with his suitcases comes hurrying on and squeezes through the door. And he plops himself down right in front of me. So he says to me, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a professor of Tanakh. So he said, who are your favorite rabbis? I said, well, I don't read the rabbis very much, but I do read the text. So he said, what's your favorite verse? Well, I kind of blew it. I said, I don't know, I like it all. I said, what's yours? He told me. And I said, oh, that's Psalm 127. He said, no, it's not. And I said, I pulled my Bible out of my knapsack and I showed him. I was right. I said, my favorite verse is Kolanu Katson Ta'inu Ish Ledarko Paninu. So, you know what that is? All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned each one to his own way. He said, I'd like to look at that. So he took my Bible. And you know what he said to me next? He said, of whom is the prophet speaking? Right out of Acts chapter 8. And I said, well, you know, the interesting thing is, I said, if you look at verse 1, it says that the servant is Israel. But then in verse 6, it says the servant is going to save Israel. So how can that work? I said, there's only one way it can work, if he's the king. Because the king can go out and fight the battle on behalf of his people. And I said, the train was coming into Leiden, so I had to keep it short. I said, that's why we believe this is Yeshua HaMashiach. So, the servant is, and if you look there, if you look in verse 4, in chapter 49, the servant has to save Israel, but he also has to save the whole world. Because this is the promise of the Abrahamic covenant. All right, I got a sidetrack there. Okay. Therefore, the passage 51:1 to 52:12 follows the second poem on the servant. If we count chapter 42 as the first poem, then it's the third poem. Chapter 51, 1 to 52:12 is a section bringing a message of comfort to those in Zion who are responding in faith and pursuing righteousness. I guess I'm running short of time. Well, I'll keep working on this. When am I supposed to end? Oh, I got to 4:15, right, at least? Correct. Yeah, okay. So this is the key to the literary structure. The key to the literary structure is a set of imperatives. So verse 1, listen to me. Then verse 4, pay attention to me. Then verse 7, listen to me. So there's an A-B-A pattern. Does everyone see that? That marks out the first one. And then you have a bunch of double imperatives. Uri, uri, awake, awake. Anoki, anoki, I. Hith, ori, arouse yourself, arouse yourself. Uri, uri, awake, awake. And then you have how beautiful are on the mountains are the feet of those who proclaim the good news. And then you have suru, suru, turn aside, turn aside. This yields the following outline. Okay? So we have the new Zion in verses 1 to 8. So I show you that the literary structure, these rhetorical signals are showing you where the paragraphs begin and end. You see what I'm doing here? Then we have the new Exodus. Then we have a challenge to unbelief. Then we have the new Exodus in 17 to 23. Then we have the new Exodus in verses 1 to 6. An interlude with celebrating good news, and then the new Exodus. So he goes around the topic 4 times with 2 interludes. Within the 3 strophes of the first stanza, the end of strophe 2 in verse 6 has a disjunctive wow with salvation and righteousness split over parallel lines. Then at the end of strophe 3 in verse 8, there is another disjunctive wow with righteousness and salvation. The order is reversed, split over parallel lines. Also at the beginning of the 4th stanza in verse 17, we have the cup of his anger parallel to the chalice cup of reeling. And then at the end of 23, we have the reverse, the chalice cup of his anger parallel to the cup of reeling. So you see these rhetorical devices are marking off the beginning and endings of the paragraphs. So the following outline attempts to delineate and describe the content in more detail. I don't know if I... So here, I can't fit it all on one slide. Great promises create hope of future salvation. The past, the rock quarry of Abraham. The future, Torah for the nations. The hope of righteousness and salvation. It will outlast the old creation. It will outlast human opposition. Then we have assurance and comfort, the new Exodus. Comfort for Zion, captives and servant. For Zion, for the captives, and for the servant. And then we have the call to Zion to begin the Exodus. The new Zion is holy, righteous, and free. The oppression and rejection of Yahweh are in the past. Then we have the news of God's salvation is fitting. The good news is fitting. The proclamation of salvation. And then the call to Zion to begin the Exodus. The separation from Babylon and trust in the God of the Exodus. Since there is no space for a complete exposition of these verses, we will have to be content to trace themes developed throughout the section. There is a plot structure developed and moving forward. The development of 5 themes may be noted. I don't think I have any more. So here are the 5 themes. The creation of a new Israel, a believing remnant and non-Israelite peoples. Number 2, the new Exodus. Number 3, the new creation. Number 4, the transformed community displays righteousness. And number 5, the transformed community experience celebration and joy. So first of all, the creation of a new Israel. In verses 10 and 11, the final stanza of chapter 50, the 3rd poem of the suffering servant, divides Israel into distinct and separate groups. Those who fear Yahweh and obey his servant, and those who follow their own insight and understanding, pictured as creating one's own fire and light. Therefore, in 51:1, those who pursue righteousness includes those in Israel who fear Yahweh and obey his servant, and excludes the rest. Not all ethnic national Israel will be comforted or saved. It's very clear right here. In verse 2, the faithful remnant is commanded to consider the rock from which they were cut and the quarry from which they were hewn. As the next verse shows, this is a figure of speech for Abraham, the father of Israel, and Sarah, the one who gave her birth. God called Abraham when he was one person so that he might bless him and make him many. What is the purpose of exhorting the remnant to look to Abraham, who was called when he was one? I suggest the correct interpretation is that this is to give hope to the remnant. God has not abandoned the Abrahamic covenant as the means for bringing blessing and salvation to the whole world. Although Israel is greatly reduced and nothing like the stars of the night sky or the sand on the seashore in the time of Isaiah, it will be reduced even further. If God did it once, he can do it again. Therefore, the covenant promise of God and his action in the past is the hope for the future. Isaiah 6:13 shows that the reduction of Israel by fire is so severe, one wonders if anyone will be left. This suggests that God might once again raise up his people from one man, the new servant David. In verses 4 to 6, the next strophe of the first stanza, God calls his people to pay attention. Torah, or covenant instruction, will come forth from Yahweh and be a light to the peoples. In verse 5, righteousness is paired with salvation. It will arrive as a gift. Yahweh will judge the nations, but also save some, for verse 5 ends by affirming that the coastlands will await him and expect his arm. Since the arm is an image of the Exodus, his mighty arm and his outstretched hand, remember? This is tantamount to saying that non-Jewish peoples will be delivered in the new Exodus. Then in verse 6, the former creation fragments and dissipates like smoke, and the inhabitants die like gnats. The use of the word gnats is a clear reference to one of the plagues against Egypt. But the salvation and righteousness of Yahweh will endure forever. Verse 7, the third strophe of the first stanza, speaks of those who know righteousness. There is a progression. We began with those seeking righteousness among the remnant. The Gentiles were included. Now we can speak of those who know righteousness. Do you see the development there? This is followed by one of the most remarkable statements in all of Isaiah, a people who have the Torah of Yahweh in their hearts. Did you see that in verse 7? A people who have the Torah of Yahweh in their hearts. Since the Torah is the instruction in the covenant, this is precisely equivalent to affirming that the people of the new covenant are a people who as a community have experienced the circumcision of the heart. The Torah of the new covenant is written on their hearts. This new humanity are not to fear the humanity of the old creation, who will be eaten up as moths corrupt clothing, but the righteousness and salvation of Yahweh will last forever. The new creation. We do not have sufficient time to discuss all the imagery from the Exodus, but let us note Isaiah's creation language in his treatment of the new creation. See how many words from the creation account are employed. Call, 51:2. Bless, 52:2. Multiply, 51:2. Eden, 51:3. Garden of Yahweh, 51:3. Heavens and earth, 51:6, 2 times. Creation, Canaanite creation myth, 51:9. Gnats, 51:6. Maker, 51:13. Plant, 51:13. Found, 51:13. New heavens and earth, 51:16. It's full of creation language. Here the doctrine of the new creation is clearly stated. In the middle of strophe of the first stanza in verse 6, the current heavens and earth will dissipate and vanish like smoke. Then in verses 12 to 16, a stanza giving encouragement and warning to Zion, the exiles and the servant, Yahweh places his word in the mouth of the servant to plant a new heavens and a new earth. Moreover, at the beginning of this stanza, Zion is accused and challenged because she has forgotten her Maker, the one who created the first heavens and earth. This is a stern warning. The idolaters in Israel have forgotten their Creator. The connection is clear. If one has no doctrine of creation, one has no doctrine of salvation. Why? Because salvation, God isn't just saving your soul, He's saving His whole creation. The significance of this passage in Isaiah is that the new creation and the new Zion are linked. The new Zion consisting of believers from the remnant of Israel and believers from the distant coastal regions who are not ethnically Israelite is in fact the new creation. And this new creation is founded and planted by the word Yahweh has put in the mouth of His servant. One of the problems in progressive dispensationalism is that their doctrine of the millennium overshadows that of the new creation. Isaiah does not appear to support the theory of mere renovation. The old creation will disappear like smoke. God will make a brand new world. The community displays righteousness and joy. We have noted the progression of thought and plot structure in this section. In 51:3, a new Eden leads to celebration and joy. In 51:8, the old creation wears out, but Yahweh's righteousness lasts forever and leads to celebration. In verses 9 to 11, Canaanite creation mythology is used to depict the future Exodus as a new creation event. This new creation will end in celebration. In verse 1, pursuing righteousness leads to verse 5, where Yahweh says, my righteousness is near. In verse 7, knowing righteousness leads to verse 8, where Yahweh says, my righteousness is forever. You see the progression? In 52:1 and 2, the beginning of the fifth of 7 stanzas in this section, we reach a climax of sorts. Awake, awake, clothe yourself with your strength, O Zion. Put on the clothes of your beauty, Jerusalem, the holy city. For no uncircumcised or unclean person will ever enter you again. These 4 lines of poetry strike the listener or reader with incredible force. The paragraph calling Zion to awake in verses 1 to 6 contrasts with the second stanza in 51:9 to 11, calling the arm of the Lord to awaken, and the fourth stanza in 51:17 to 23, calling Zion to rouse herself. The first paragraph is addressed to the Lord and calls the arm of the Lord to awaken and put on strength, as in the time of the Exodus from Egypt. Deuteronomy 5:15 is one of many, many passages that recalls this. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. The mighty hand and the outstretched arm are metaphors that became symbols of the mighty display of the power in the 10 plagues and the crossing of the Red Sea that released Israel from her slavery in Egypt. By contrast, 52:1 to 6 calls Zion to clothe herself with her strength. There is a cause and effect relationship here. Zion can put on strength because Yahweh has put on strength and done what is necessary to release her from slavery, this time from slavery to sin. Now she must put on strength, the strength to get up out of the dirt and come home. Zion is like a child walking along a road that had a muddy section. She stumbled in the muck and the puddles and sat down. Finally, her father comes and reaches down to lift her up. Now she must reach up and take his hand and pull herself up as he gives her his strong arm. The question is this: will she let herself be pulled out, or would she rather stay and play in the mud? In 51:17 to 23, the picture is of a drunk person whose hangover is finished, and now they must rouse themselves and get on with life. Here in this text, we have a picture of someone imprisoned who is now set free. The question is, will they get up and walk away, or will they sit there, satisfied to stay in their filthy surroundings? Jerusalem was called to be a holy city, a community devoted to the Lord. By her undivided worship of the one true and living God, by justice expressed in the way people treated each other in the community, and by her good stewardship of the earth's resources, she would be distinct from the corruption in the societies around her. In judgment, God has allowed nations and peoples with no understanding of her ways to enter and corrupt her society with different perspectives and ways of doing things, so that her community no longer reflects the pattern established for her by God. The question is, does she even want to be free from this defiling situation? Isaiah speaks of being clothed with strength and beautiful clothes. What do these represent? An analysis of all the adjectives, nouns, and verbs in beauty in Israel, dealing with beauty, shows that it represents the righteousness of God, now given to his people and displayed in human relationships. We can summarize the data by referring to 54:11b to 14a. Look, I am laying your bricks with black mortar, and I shall lay your foundations with lapis lazuli pavement. I shall hang your shining shields on the battlements like rubies, and make your gates like sparkling red jewels. And your perimeter will be special stones, and all your children will be taught by the Lord, and great will be the shalom of your sons. You will be established in righteousness. The beauty and strength of the construction of the future Zion pictures the righteousness of the new covenant community. That's what he's explaining here. Verse 14a explains the vision of the beautiful battlements of the new Zion. You will be established in righteousness. In case you don't understand the metaphors, he's telling you, here's how to interpret my text. Here's how to interpret these images. Then Isaiah says something absolutely astonishing. No uncircumcised or unclean person will ever enter again into the holy city. In ancient Israel, the person who is uncircumcised represents those outside the covenant community. The unclean person represents the person within Israel who is defiled and unable to enter the temple for worship. Neither one, we are told, will ever enter again. The term uncircumcised in this text must either be metaphorical of the circumcision of the heart or symbolic of covenant membership, since we already know that covenant membership is given to non-Israelites. Thus, by the terms uncircumcised and unclean, Isaiah is referring to anyone who is not a member of the covenant community and might defile it from without, or who is a member and might defile it from within. And here is the kicker. Jerusalem is called a holy city. The only occurrence of this expression is 48:2, where Isaiah denies to ethnic national Israel the right to call themselves the holy city. So read it. Isaiah 48 verse 2. National ethnic Israel cannot call herself the holy city. It's the new Zion that can call itself the holy city. Remember that in chapter 1 of Isaiah, the faithful city has become a prostitute, a whore. Now she is redeemed, and once more we can speak of a covenant community completely devoted to the Lord and characterized by chesed and emeth in all relations. Okay, we're about to conclude here. I think I'll finish on time for once. Isaiah challenges the covenant and dispensational theology. Isaiah's description of the new Zion as a city, geographical location, and people brings a challenge to covenant theology because the community is not mixed. It is also a challenge to dispensational theology because the covenant is not defined in ethnic national terms. A contra-covenant theology. First, Israel's vision of the transformed Zion challenges covenant theology because there is no uncircumcised and no unclean person in the city. In fact, the city as such is now holy, completely devoted to the Lord. Covenant theologians might interpret Isaiah 52 verse 2 by appealing to the already / not yet of prophecy and argue that the new creation community described by Isaiah concerns a future point in time. The only problem with such an interpretation is that the 7th stanza repeats, by means of chiasm and inclusio, the teaching of the 5th stanza, and Paul cites this text, applying it to the church in Corinth. 2 Corinthians 6:17, therefore go out from their midst and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing, and then I will welcome you. Paul rejects the concept of the church as a community that is mixed, and he rejects the concept that when Isaiah speaks of no uncircumcised or unclean person being in the new covenant community, it is future. Rather, he believes it to be true of the church now, because he's quoting Isaiah 52. Contra-dispensational theology. Second, Isaiah's vision of transformed theology, Zion, challenges dispensational theology because the transformed Zion consists of the believing Israelite remnant as well as those of the distant nations who hope in Yahweh. The terms for Israel in Isaiah and the metaphor of trees supports this view. So there's so much I don't have time. You should read chapter 56, where it talks about the eunuch and the foreigner. Don't let the eunuch say, I am outside. Don't let the foreigner say outside. Because you know they're not only going to be included, they're going to be offering the sacrifices. They're going to be so far into the in-group, they're going to be like the priests and Levites offering the sacrifices. So you can see very clearly that Gentiles will be included in the one people of God. The terms for Israel in Isaiah. I checked all occurrences of the terms Jacob, Israel, people, city, Jerusalem, and Zion in the entire book of Isaiah. I carefully analyzed and considered them all. Space does not permit a detailed treatment of these terms here, but the conclusions may be mentioned. The terms Jacob and Israel, especially when paired, almost always refer to ethnic Israel. Ethnic Israel seems to be bound for recreation in Isaiah 43:1 and 44:1. The term people in the singular, and especially in the expression my people, moves from referring to ethnic Israel to including Gentile nations. Jerusalem frequently refers to the physical city or the rebuilding of it. Zion speaks of the city in terms of its people, and this is in transformation in Isaiah. It changes from referring to ethnic Israel to referring to a transformed populace that includes believing folks from both Israel and the nations. The servant of Yahweh, discussed in the poems in 49, 50, and 53, produces the servants. Did you notice that? Chapter 54, 17, the word servants is in the plural. The servant becomes the servants. And by the end of Isaiah in chapter 65, these servants are contrasted with unbelieving ethnic Israel. Look at 65, 6:13 to 16. Finally, in a number of places, the transformation of Zion stretches language so that Isaiah announces that the creation of future Israel will be given another name or a new name. Chapter 1, verse 26, 58, 12, 60, 14, 62, 2 and 4, and 12, 65, 15. This is in contrast to claims by ethnic national Israel to be the real Israel in 48, 1 and 2. So Isaiah denies ethnic Israel the right to call themselves Israel, and he says in all of these other verses that I quoted that the new people of God will be given a different name. Trees as metaphors of kings and kingdoms. Kingdoms in the Old Testament are pictured as stately tall trees. Although the vine comes from Isaiah, the olive tree in Romans 11 comes from Jeremiah. Especially in Isaiah 5 to 12, the Lord is chopping down trees, including Israel. Yet there are new Exodus promises here as well. After the Lord chops down his people, a shoot comes from the stump of Jesse. This is not another David, but a new David. This root in Isaiah 53 bears the sins of many. In conclusion, in summary, Paul's treatment in Romans 11 is probably derived from Isaiah. Kingdoms in the Old Testament are pictured as stately tall trees. Although the vine comes from Isaiah, the olive tree from Jeremiah. Nonetheless, the idea that Israelite branches are broken off and non-Israelite branches are grafted in nicely sums up the flow of thought in Isaiah. Depending upon one's interpretations of Romans 11, there may well be branches of ethnic Israel grafted back in, but they will be grafted into a city or kingdom that contains both Jew and non-Jew. Thank you.